A certain Canadian clinical psychologist strongly believes in the power of stories to give us meaningful and important life lessons, to let us act out modes of being. Imagine my delight when I noticed one of that psychologist's life rules being played out in a story that took 30 years to finally translate to the screen. So, in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, we can explore what would happen if everybody were forced to tell the truth, and what that potentially tells us about the applicability of Peterson's rule. This video made possible thanks to the continuing support of viewers, patrons, and PayPal pals like you. Thanks! Hello, and welcome back to this cognitive psychologist's next attempt at media analysis. As mentioned in the opening, this time we are going to focus on the Sandman series that just premiered on Netflix. So I'm trying to do a death from the graphic novels sort of thing here. I thought about doing my hair in the big 90s way, but we're good. I have a raven. That's the same, right? We will start with a very brief overview of the story before getting to light spoilers for one character and then heavy spoilers for the 5th episode. Once we get into the heavy spoilers, we're not leaving heavy spoilers, so if you're interested in this stuff but you haven't watched roughly halfway through the series, this video isn't going to be safe for you after time. We're also going to squeeze in there a rehashing of the relevant parts of Jordan B. Peterson's Rule 8 from the original 12 Rules for Life and Antidote to Chaos. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. The full hashing of that can be found in the little linky thing or in the link in the description, along with the links for my merch and Patreon. Before getting into the video itself, let me give you the very quick review. I absolutely loved it. I haven't read the graphic novels yet, but it was good. Casting choices, the VFX, the music, the story, it was just, good job, Netflix. So we're going to give this one 10 Raven Buddies out of 10. Would recommend. Sandman primarily follows one of the 7 anthropomorphic personifications of forces in our lives. The protagonist is Dream, but we also meet death, desire, and despair. At the start of the series, Dream gets captured by a man who is hoping to force death to give him his dead son back. But eventually Dream breaks out, and the series basically follows him as he sets about undoing the damage done during his imprisonment. The Lord of Sleep has 3 tools that are imbued with some of his power: a bag of sand, a helm, and a ruby. These are taken from him by his captors, so he needs to get them back before he can really take on rebuilding the kingdom. The ruby can make dreams come true. In the hands of the Lord of Sleep, Morpheus, Dream, he has a lot of titles, things are fine. But in the hands of people, things can go south pretty quick. Super briefly, the ruby passes through a couple hands but ends up in the possession of John, the descendant of Dream's captor. Some years before the start of the series, John exploded some people with the ruby because they were trying to take it from him, as you do, and so he was put into a very guarded psych ward by his mom. After Dream gets out, John's mother finds out that he's gonna want his stuff back. Fearing for her son's safety, but also trying to keep him away from the ruby, she gives him an amulet of protection and tells him, "You don't need the ruby anymore, you got this, you're fine." But he doesn't listen to her advice to just not get the ruby, because he views it as his, so retrieves it for himself. What is John's motivation? Why is he doing all of this? Well, his mother stole Dream's tools from John's father when she ran away from him. He wanted her to abort John, and she wasn't on board with that plan. So they were on the run from a very powerful man on top of the ticking time bomb locked in that man's basement. As such, John and his mother moved a lot, used a lot of assumed names, all while she built up a career as an antiquities dealer.
When she was alive, my mother was a very successful thief. Stole jewelry, other people's identities. That's why we had to keep moving all the time. It's why she lied about everything, even to me.
John hated all of the deception and lies and felt that his mother was never really honest with him. This shaped his view on people in general, as he told the woman who was kindly offering to give him a lift.
Knowing people are selfish sets you free from having to take their actions, their lies, personally.
So, his ultimate goal is to use the ruby to save the world, starting by forcing people to not lie to each other. By this point in the series, I'd already gotten some Peterson-y vibes from John. He has a very two-box way of looking at people. They're either helpful or they're in the way. They're honest or they're liars. But this emphasis on honesty really drove it home for me. Peterson sees two distinct ways of existing: telling the truth or, quote, taking the easy way out. At the San Francisco stop of Peterson's Beyond Order book tour, when asked if there were some rules worth breaking, he said the one to never break under any circumstances was the original's Rule 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. All of the other rules are more guidelines than hard and fast rules, but never, ever lie. Peterson seems to be of the opinion that only speaking the truth will, quote, bring the most habitable reality into being, end quote, that we can collectively change the world into a paradise by doing so. He views anything other than the truth as manipulation with the intent to get what one wants. He says these little lies build up into life lies, where, driven by pride, we attempt to lie into existence our flawed view of what we want reality to be. But in doing this, you weaken your character, which means that the slightest bit of pushback from life will result in your undoing. The good news, in Peterson's view, is that it's never too late to switch to being truthful. It's just that sacrifice will be involved. Potentially a lot of sacrifice to burn away the lies. He emphasizes this is worth doing because lying, even the little white lies, quote, corrupt the soul and the state alike. And what happens to these corrupt liars? They go to hell, said to be a very real and eternal facet of our existence. Peterson puts the blame for unbearable misery, resentment, and vengefulness on lies, for all the horrors we've inflicted on each other. It doesn't really matter how small or innocuous your lie is. He says it will taint that beyond which it comes into contact with. But telling the truth will fix and prevent all this. Truth will make buildings that last. It will take care of the poor and somehow improve everyone's wealth and safety everywhere. It will make everyone friends and everything sunshine and rainbows, just by no one lying ever again. Hopefully the quick and dirty version of Peterson's non-negotiable piece of life advice will be sufficient for my eventual point. Peterson's motivation in this advice seems to also be to save the world. The 5th episode in the series, 24/7, is basically a bottle episode. It focuses on a handful of people in a diner who were unfortunate enough to cross paths with John. The episode passes through a couple cycles. First, we see how things are without John's interference. There's Bet, the waitress. She wants to be a writer, has a kid home visiting from college, and thinks she has a good sense about people and what would be in their best interests. Next up is Marsh, the diner's cook. We don't find out a lot about him, particularly early on, other than Bet seems to have a non-reciprocated relationship with him. Then there's Judy, a regular of the diner. She arrives very upset after a fight she had with her girlfriend, Donna. Mark is a newcomer to the diner, and is just there to kill a little time before a job interview with a nearby pharma company. Our final two scene members are Kate and Gary, the P and VP for that pharma company. They are here to celebrate their anniversary, as Bet connected them by sitting them next to each other. A move Judy notes she just tried doing with her and Mark, noting that Bet's sense is off because Judy's a lesbian. While waiting for their food, Gary expresses some unhappiness with Kate stepping in and doing parts of his job after she asks him who he's texting. With the capacity to lie intact, Bet does the normal service industry chit-chat with people, Marsh is withdrawn and focused on the job, Judy is upset but not wanting to talk about specifics of her big fight with Donna, Mark is people watching, and Kate and Gary have an awkward meal. While Gary is tempted by a mega burger, Kate is pushing for him to eat healthy, so he orders a salad under pressure from her. Somewhere bad info enters the system and Gary gets the mega burger. Some more passive-aggressive banter, and Gary decides, you know what, fuck it, I'm eating this burger. This is basically our reality. We can lie. Sometimes as social lubrication, as in the case of Bet trying to boost her tips, or as a way of dodging difficult conversations, as in the case of Kate and Gary trading disguised jabs over the burger. I would argue that some of these untruths aren't that harmful to the person telling them, hearing them, or to society at large. Bet calling John handsome isn't going to send anybody down a spiral of fascist raisin cookies of doom. Granted, some of the communication depicted could benefit from more openness and honesty. Going back to that married couple, they are dancing around a lot of deep relationship problems that aren't going to fix themselves unless they address them. But the place to do that probably isn't in the diner. With how things are in their resting state and how the people are interacting now established, it's time for John to have his go at remaking the world. First Judy, and then Kate and Gary, are prevented from leaving by John and his wishing ruby. Judy's convinced to stay by Bet, but Kate and Gary repeat their dinner outright. Meanwhile, the news running in the background mentions unusual weather. With lying off the table, a whole bunch of cats are about to be let out of their bags. Relying on her sense of what will help and what people really need, Bet introduces the nervous Mark to the corpos. Kate, mad about whoever Gary was texting, happily says she'll interview Mark on the spot. Gary is not pleased. Bet goes into the back and talks to Marsh, who tries to gently shut her down. She keeps at it though, trying to get him to come over after work. Marsh unleashes his truth on her, that he's only interesting to her because he's available, and he's only really interested in her son. This, understandably, upsets Bet, and Gary comes to see what happened. With Gary gone, the job interview shifts to being very personal, including how Kate built up Gary to where he is now. While Marsh cleans up, Gary tells him how he's feeling, that
she's auditioning the new me,
and mourns the loss of his burger. Marsh cooks him a new one. Judy goes to comfort Bet. Kate tells Mark that she feels cast aside by her husband, as he'll sleep with anyone except for her. But hey, silver lining.
Which is fine, because he's not very good at it.
Then Kate propositions Mark. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Gary shares his side. He feels trapped and controlled by Kate, and that he can't really get out. So he fucks around when she's not around. And wouldn't you know it, she's not directly around right now.
Sometimes you just need to get your dick sucked. You know?
Bet tells Judy she thinks she can do better than Donna.
Like you? No. Or yes, I don't know.
And then all the pairs just get really intimate. Alright, at this point in the story, speaking only the truth has gotten people to hook up with people other than who they would have otherwise, including some pandas. Good for them. And John has stolen some ice cream from the diner. Yay! So far, the truth has opened the way to scratch some more basic itches. With the sex out of the way, what's next? Well, we find out that Judy is so sure her relationship with Donna is over because in their fight, Judy hit Donna. Gary attacks Mark for sexing his wife. Mark kills him in self-defense. Kate is distraught. Bet figures out John is responsible for everything going down from a conversation they had earlier. John shifts the blame back at them.
All I did was take away the lies. You all did the rest.
For a moment, it looks like the surviving diner gang is going to attack John, but he rubies them out of it. Not content to just leave things be, he rubs their faces in it, saying he offered them a world where they could be themselves without having to suffer for it, but they just like to suffer too much.
And if that is your truth, then perhaps your suffering will set you free.
John's idea seems to fit in with Peterson's claim that shifting to a truth-only life would require sacrifice. That the old way of doing things has lies just woven into every facet of it, and so it needs to be burned away to make space for the new, pure way of doing things. Fittingly, the live news shows orange skies, indicating there's a whole lot of shit on fire somewhere. Continuing this idea, in a voiceover, John says that truth will burn away the lies, while everyone sets about truthing themselves. Bet burns her writing. Marsh cuts off his fingers. Judy cuts out her tattoo for Donna. Mark's hand gets nailed to the counter by Kate before he cuts it off, and Kate joins her husband in death. When all that's done, Bet is the only one left standing to ask John,
How is this a better world?
John answers that she's still seeing it with her eyes, which prompts her to remove them. At this point, Dream is finally able to show up and asks John what he's doing.
Saving the world from its lies.
Dream says that's not what the ruby's for, and that he needs to fix the damage John has caused. John counters by saying he's helping by revealing the truth of mankind. They then argue over how to interpret our natural state. John says that we're lying to ourselves, but Dream says that these actually reflect our hopes and dreams and give us something to live for.
But if you rob them of their dreams, if you take away their hope, then yes, this is the truth of mankind.
Then it shifts to who gets to be the Dream Lord and away from the case I'm making, so we'll end the recap here. Other than noting the residual havoc Dream and Matthew the Raven chat in, a visual representation of the chaos unleashed by people only speaking the truth. So, let's revisit the gist of Peterson's truth rule in the context of this episode. Test his assertions about the earth-shaking and saving nature of truth-telling, as played out in his favorite simulation testbed: fictional stories. One idea from Peterson is that liars are basically in a hell of their own construction that also corrupts society at large. From the looks John gave to people before making his truth wish, one interpretation could be that he viewed the way people were living as hellish, like Gary not ordering his truth burger, but caving to the lie salad. If people can't even order the food they want, how could they possibly contribute to a functional society? Real talk. Kate and Gary's relationship was in a bad state. There is no denying that. They were profoundly unhappy. And maybe they would have benefited from some more open and honest communication about what their needs were and how the relationship wasn't really working for them. Maybe all of it could have been worked on and the relationship could be saved. Maybe not. Same goes for Bet and Marsh and Judy and Donna. There were unhealthy relationship dynamics in all of those. But there is a huge difference between dodging difficult conversations and forcing 100% truth on everyone. It's possible to encourage open and honest communication between people without insisting on total truth in all situations. The diner deaths and worldwide mayhem may map onto Peterson's idea of sacrifice being necessary to usher in the new truthful way of doing things. I could even see the case being made that the short-term costs are necessary to wipe the slate clean for the new, pure way of living. But there's a problem here, aside from all the carnage. This is assuming that total truth is the ideal mode of living, which, as we'll talk about in a few, I'm not convinced of. Peterson, like John, seems to think that speaking the truth at all times will lead to a glimmering utopia, that this act will be the thing to fix everything wrong with the world. And I think this is unrealistic. And to cut off the comments that I am taking Peterson out of context or strawmanning him, let me remind you of a couple things from Rule 8. That deceit is what makes people miserable. That lies produce the horrors we associate with names like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. While I would agree that lies played a role in those things, it's ignoring all of the other factors, like the social and power structures and people who benefited from those actions. Addressing the lying issue wouldn't fix all of those other things. If there's anything we've learned from the past couple years, particularly the current one, it's that people can be pretty willing to accept some really awful truths from others. People can just come out and own their bigotry and say whatever their kind of fucked up goals are and be met with applause and praise. Lying is not the problem here. But I'm going to interrupt myself to finish the Peterson thought first. If we were to tell the truth at all times, we could, quote, bring the most habitable reality into being, end quote. Build things that truly last. Fix the inequalities in the world. But Peterson's claim here still fits the problems I was describing. The inequalities aren't going to be fixed with truth. We know how fucking obscenely wealthy some people are. They make little attempt to deceive on those fronts. Forcing people to tell the truth isn't going to somehow make the rich give a shit about everyone worse off than them. The inequality isn't the fault of those who are starving on the streets either. It's not like they've been deceiving others about their situation. Potentially even worse, I think forcing people to speak only truth would put so many people in danger. Like all of the LGBTQ people who are in unsafe situations, but are skating by with some semblance of safety because they're hiding their truth. Sure, forcing them to speak and live their truth could potentially reveal to the greater power structure oppressing them just how many people there are in that demographic, potentially counted among loved ones. But that wouldn't address the issues underlying the roots of the bigotry, which would likely remain unchanged even when confronted with that. Then there's the people in dangerous relationships who are walking the razor-thin edge with an abusive partner. Peterson, a clinical psychologist, should know that the dynamics in an abusive relationship aren't there entirely because the abused partner just isn't speaking their truth to their abuser. If anything, moments of brave truth tend to be punished. Over and over again, small attempts at exerting boundaries can be met with sometimes violent resistance. Over time, it's learned that the truth is dangerous. Because it is with that person. Suddenly being compelled into the naked truth seems like a recipe for tragedy. Particularly when coupled with the abuser also having this same truth compulsion. We're pulling this last example from Peterson's pivot into being a video essayist. A recent-ish video was a message to Muslims. This message is basically that everyone just needs to openly and honestly communicate with each other. If people could only just get to talking with each other, all the differences would fall away and problems would be solved. Now, on the surface, this doesn't sound bad, but this specifically includes differences between the Sunni and Shia Muslims, as well as between the Muslims and Jews. They just need to remember who their common enemy really is.
We must take the idea that the satanic impulse within is the prime enemy with all due seriousness.
And talk it out. Yeah, I don't think having an open and honest chat is going to fix these things. I make no claims about knowing what would fix these things, because this is a topic with a whole lot of history and just badness everywhere. But I can also recognize that this white American with a vaguely Christian upbringing doesn't really have the cultural competency required to give meaningful advice here. That I shouldn't be inserting myself into this situation saying, I know what'll fix it. Have you guys tried talking? All that said, would Peterson's truth imperative have the disastrous results depicted or implied in the show? I want to say no, but it's 2022, so I've learned to not rule out the preposterous at this point. One final thought. Why should we have to tell the truth at all times? Why are other people entitled to know exactly what we think about any particular thing at any random time? The more I think about it, the more this seems like an intrusion into a person's privacy. Peterson likes to bang the 1984 drum about vaccine mandates and pronouns and diversity, but demanding that people give total transparency into their thoughts seems very Orwellian to me. On top of that, as Twitter has more than demonstrated, every thought we have doesn't need to be shared. It's actually kind of more harmful when we do. And that's just the stuff that people are willing to admit publicly. Imagine the consequences of sharing the just random ass truths that pop into your head. Does that person who just walked by need to know that you think they are quite bonable? That might be your truth in the moment, but they don't need to know that. Is a shitty situation going to be improved by telling an asshole point blank that they're being an asshole? Sure. There is a possibility that this particular asshole will take that feedback to heart and work on being less of a jerk. But there's also the very real possibility that in this asshole's truth, they're being totally reasonable. Which, I guess, leads us to a sort of philosophical problem. Is there such a thing as a universal objective truth in these situations? It seems to me that whenever people are involved, there is at least an equivalent number of truths in play. Who gets to be the arbiter of what is most true when conflicts inevitably arise? Should there be one? And then there's the issue that a person can have multiple conflicting truths at any point. As it is, we can internally work through these truths using judgment and reasoning for which one we want to favor at any moment. Like, going back to the example, apparently, a person can think, wow, that is a smoking hot hottie over there that I would just love to smash my dirty bits with. But also, I am in a happy monogamous relationship and I would like to keep it happy and monogamous. Which of these truths, which are both very true for me at this moment, do I want to honor? It seems like in John's world, these truths would just kind of pop out and you have to deal with it. In fairness to Peterson, he isn't overtly compelling people to share these little truths. but he also hasn't provided real clear guidance for where the boundary conditions should be on what should be shared versus not. A lot of his truth advice is couched in grandiose language about the goodness of your aim goals and the logos, so it's sort of up to the reader's discretion how to apply it in their day-to-day lives. Let's wrap this video up. Sandman was written by someone with their own belief system, motivations for telling the story how he did, and points he wanted to convey. These almost certainly do not align with Peterson's, if Gaiman's responses to people accusing him of going woke in this adaptation are any indication. But Gaiman's version of a truth-stricken world seems bleak. It is, as described by Dream, a world without hope. That we need the buffer of some untruths to function, to have space to not just be trapped in the reality of what is, but to dream of what could be. While I would disagree with Peterson about the central importance of fictional stories in telling us exactly how we should be living our lives, I definitely enjoyed the Sandman series on Netflix, and as I said, I'm going to be hunting down the graphic novels because I loved my first little bit of exposure to this universe and am eager for more, and it's certainly given me some stuff to think about, and maybe you too. Anyways, till next time, bye.